Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'm seeing myself. I don't get to see everybody else online, but I'm waving at you as we talk. It's nice to see some familiar faces, both online and in person. And my name is Mukei. I'm one of the senior students here at the Village Zendo. And I also, I'm one of the co-leaders, People of Color group, sitting group, which meets on Saturdays at 10:30. Usually after our talk, we have we call it a tea, but we just have a little social time to kind of catch up with each other and find out what's going on. And one day, one of our members had asked, so how are the teachings helping you these days? Well, there was a notable silence. And I mumbled something like, well, you know, I try to be very mindful of those who I'm sitting in front of or I'm in front of, because it's very easy to demonize people. And those present kind of mumbled pretty much the same thing. But how are the teachings helping me these days? For those of you who've been in the city, we've gone through 14 days of 90 plus weather, almost in the triple digits with humidity. We've heard talk of Project 2025 as we speak, and the Republican National Convention is meeting in Milwaukee, and little blurbs that have come out about what to be expecting about how to make America great. There's been mob violence, hate speech, finger pointing, and the list goes on and on. And I have to confess, as a man of color, I'm concerned. Because with all the rhetoric that's been going on in the waves, are they going to be, when will they come for me? Who's going to help me? So how are the teachings helping me these days? As I said, right now my response has been, I try to be mindful of those who I interact with. I try not to demonize. But it's not easy. I am reminded that I took a vow to save all sentient beings, but it's very easy said than done. It's very easy to let a very caustic remark come out of my mouth, or to have a smirky moment about a recent failed assassination attempt. What helps me is the stories of the Buddha. The Buddha struggled. There's a series of tales called Jakata Tales, or birth stories, told by the Buddha himself, about how he was took many forms before he reached final enlightenment. He was a king, he was a murderer, he was an ogre, he was a robber. And a story I go back to a lot of times, especially at times like this, is called The Brave Little Parrot. And the story goes something like this. A little gray parrot grew up in a jungle. Everything was lovely, and the animals in the jungle got along very well. But above the jungle, in the clouds, were the gods. And the gods would look down on the forest and just be having a party. Everything was cool as the ego drifted by. But there were very variations on this story. One day, while the parrot was in the tree, lightning hit a dead tree, and a fire started. And the parrot saw the fire beginning to spread. And so the story goes that the parrot flew, one of the variations is that the parrot flew to the river in the jungle to be safe. Then the parrot heard the other animals screaming and then decided to do something. That's variation 1. Variation 2 is that when the parrot saw the fire began to spread, the parrot immediately started to scream, get out, fire, fire, and encouraged all the animals to run to the river. But it continues then that the parrot then continues, flies to the river, and then dives into the water and then lets the water accumulate on her feathers and goes to where the fire is spreading and begins to try dousing the fire with her wings. I keep saying her because Rafe Martin uses the female pronoun. When it's in the Jakata Tales, it's a he. So if I slip into she, he, we're cool. But the parrot just flew and would just fly and douse the fire with the water. And she did that repeatedly. And the gods then stopped their merrymaking and they looked and they said, look at that. Look at that. And they started laughing. And one of the gods decided to go and talk the parrot out of it. So this particular god assumed the form of an eagle and went flying by the parrot and said, you're wasting your time. Let this go. There's no need in saving those animals. Let the forest burn. Let it go. But the parrot was determined to put out the fire. So the parrot would descend into the water repeatedly, shake off the water off her wings, and continue to dive until the point that she started to suffer from smoke inhalation. Her feathers began to become singed, and she started, and her eyes were starting to get crusty from the flames. And the god, who was flying near her, trying to convince her to get rid of to stop, started to choke on the smoke and then flew above and began to witness what was going on. And the god was so moved that the god began to cry. And so the story goes that the tears of the god fell onto the parrot, onto the jungle, and onto the animals. And as a result, the forest was healed, the animals were healed, and the parrot was healed and transformed. So you can say that the parrot lived into the vow to save all sentient beings, but it took some time. The parrot was content and capable of saving herself, but realized that there is more. It's a process. To save all sentient beings is not a ritual we'll probably enact tonight at the end of this, that we just do, but it is a process. But you know, let's not all focus in on the parrot. Let's focus in on the animals. Let's focus in on the gods. Because you know what? The amazing thing about the stories is that they're all in this room. The parrot, the gods, and the animals. So to the gods present in the room, do you think we should ignore difficulties and wear our rose-colored glasses? It's very easy to assume that in Zen, right? Rafe Martin, as I mentioned earlier, is a Zen teacher, quoted his, and he's a storyteller, quoted his teacher, Rapallu Roshi, who said that being a Buddhist doesn't mean acting like Buddha. If you're at a party sitting in a corner with crossed legs, wearing a halo, looking wise and kind, get up, speak to people, and have some hors d'oeuvres. To the animals present in the room, should we accept whatever happens to us and just call it fate or karma? Sometimes the process requires us to move on, to leave. If the situation is not healthy, it's not safe, and it's not emotionally fulfilling. The parrot would say, Do something. Do something. Smelling smoke, seeing fire. The parrot says, fire, fire, run to the river. The parrot responds to the cries of the gods and the animals. And the process is healing and transformation. In the Blue Cliff Record, case number 14, Yeoman's appropriate statement, a monk asked Yeoman, what are the teachings of a whole lifetime? Yeoman said, an appropriate statement. The appropriate statement depends on time, I think, place, and condition. I really don't have to tell you all that the world is on fire. We all know that. But the world does require an appropriate statement. And that is a process. So to all the parrots and the gods and the animals in this bad, fiery world, an appropriate statement is needed right now. So let's all throw ourselves into the water and shake our feathers.